So probably more work creating horse harness and also mending it than with building saddles, but that would be another part of the work. And yeah, saddles are back here. So this is there's a lady saddle here which has the sort of horn on the side, knee rest, and then men's saddles as well.
Well, is this real too?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so we have different types of hide that would come from different animals. And this one is, I believe it's a cowhide, and it still has, so it's one of the hairier forms of cow, breed cow. And that's an untanned pig hide.
Oh. Thank you.
Okay.
Good.
And here we have our ramp to go into the general store here at the back.
Okay.
You would have a seat if you like, but this was, as well as a store, it was a postal station, so the store owner would have had the contract with the postal services to receive and send mail. So people would have had a box that they could come into the store and a bit of wind there, I think. Yeah. So the general store was the place you came on a regular basis to get things that you needed if you were in a rural area. So if you lived in the village, if you were on a farm outside of the village. But it was also the place that you may have marketed much of what you produced. So now the harness maker probably wasn't going to make things for the storekeeper, but the blacksmith might, or other tradesmen might make things that the storekeeper would then have available for sale, ready-made, rather than having to go and request something. Tin items by the tinsmith might have been made and sold from the general store, and it would be where you, when you ran up your line of credit, as it were, you would bring the goods that you produced to essentially sell to the storekeeper. So there would be an account book where they would keep track of everything that you had bought and the monetary value of it. And then in most cases, people brought some kind of goods in exchange for that. So they would later bring in a firkin or a little small barrel full of butter that they had made, and that would have a monetary value, and that would be entered as a credit on their account page. And also the storekeepers ended up being marketers of things like eggs and even grain and flour and other produce, where they would, those products of the farms would come into the store, and the store would act as a dealer and sell them into one of the markets. So this is a very important job, not just providing things for people, but also being as a sort of marketing hub for them. So we have various types of cloth there, some of which you will see in people's clothing if you see some more staff around the village. This would be mass-produced cotton cloth coming from England or from the factories in Massachusetts, as well as woolen cloth, probably from Scotland and other parts of the British Isles, linen cloth, probably from Ireland, and then silk, which would have been produced in some places in the United States and in England. So the silk cloth, they probably wouldn't have had a large selection of it. It was much more expensive, but they would have had some. But the cotton cloth would have been the day-to-day clothing of people at this time of year. It was easy to wash, and you could make use of it in different ways. And it was quite inexpensive. Unfortunately, one of the reasons it was inexpensive is that cotton was being grown using slave labor in the southern United States and a few other parts of the area. So after the Civil War, American Civil War ended, it was there was a period of adjustment, but the prices did still stay low because labor for the cotton producers was still fairly cheap. And there was a lot of handmade woolen cloth that was produced.
They make also the clothing.
Yeah, so in the province there was a lot of handmade woolen cloth. So people would process their own sheep's wool. It would be carded. They would spin it into yarn, take it to a weaver to be woven into cloth, and then take that back and make it into clothing. So women's winter dresses, for example, were often made of a soft wool flannel. And you might, complement that with some store-bought cloth that was complementary, but I'm going to show you some examples of hand-spun yarn there.
This reminds me of a Little House on the Prairie times. It was around that time. Right?
Yeah, so the general store model was pretty similar all across the continent. They had to have a little bit of everything, but enough variety in some areas that they would keep their customers and they wouldn't go looking for things elsewhere.
It's amazing. What's in that room there?
So that's just an area that basically has to do with that idea of being an aggregator, so someone who would buy things or take payment in things. So we have sort of a desk for them, examples like furs being brought in as payment, and then on this side sort of barrels and things that represent what they would have been receiving as payment.
Oh, like a barter or something?
Everything was done in monetary terms, so it wasn't like I've got a bushel of potatoes, can I buy 5 yards of cloth? It was all tracked in a monetary basis. It's just that usually it wasn't coins and bills changing hands a lot of the time. Sometimes it did, but they actually had a hard time sort of keeping currency circulating.
So everything was like trading.
Yes, ultimately, a lot of payments were in kind. So things like eggs could be packed into barrels to be shipped down to the market. And we have an example also of something coming in. So China, very cheap, mass-produced China was coming from England. It would be packed into barrels with straw to keep it from breaking, although that wasn't always possible.
Thank you. Nice to live here.
Which way you go? This way?
mowing the lawn today and
Good.
all the grass away.
Yeah. Big loan.